Brian, on our Newsmaker hotline right now, Joe Persichini. He's the executive director of the D.C. Police Foundation. He's also the former assistant director in charge of the Washington field office for the FBI. And Mr. Persichini, thanks for joining us this morning. You know, we're looking at this scene, and we see the Boston police, the transit police, the ATF agents, FBI agents. Now we're seeing photos of the National Guard, a convoy of the National Guard coming in. Talk to me about the massive coordination of all of these agencies trying to address a crime like this.
Brian and Larry, great to be with you this morning. And, you know, as you look at this, first, you know, my thoughts and prayers to the people of Boston, Watertown, to the police officer who made the ultimate sacrifice last night. You could just imagine that police officer from MIT working a midnight shift, and now he's chasing a vehicle with gunshots being out and devices being thrown out the window, as we've heard. This is a very volatile, dangerous situation, and first thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, now you must engage, we call the active shooter plan, because you have incidents across the city, you have investigations that need to be done. I mean, this is really a situation that you can never train for. So now you have the identification of a subject or subjects. Now you at least can send teams out. You find out where the residence is. You may have their cell phone. So now you're beginning to collect the data that you need to determine whether is there more than two. This is where Ed Davies, the chief, and Rick Delorier, the SAC of the FBI office there, they got to hold back their teams because this is very, very critical right now.
Joe, the earlier reporting was that these individuals may have been from overseas. They may have had military training, and they have been into this country for about a year. Both the Associated Press in the last few moments and also NBC News are reporting that the suspects may come from Chechnya and spent time in Turkey and have lived in the United States for about 1 year. If that information turns out to be correct, what does it tell you?
Well, we've been preparing and always looking at threat streams for years about, you know, planted individuals, whether Al-Qaeda or other groups. Chechnya is a country that's been war-torn for how many years? These are individuals who've been engaged in battle their whole life. So, you know, I think we need to set back a little bit. We need to let law enforcement do their job. And I know that's very hard I'm probably preaching here to the media to say, this is dangerous. Let's work up. You know, I look at that press conference yesterday, and I know that, you know, it was both Rick and Ed Davies looking for the American people's help, but my catch is those photos were directed to the friends, family, and associates of those two subjects.
Joe Persichini, thanks for bringing that up, because I wanted to take you back to yesterday afternoon from your experience in the FBI. What went into that decision to release those photos, and what was the hope that they would just have a friend or family member sort of, not use the vernacular, rat these people out and actually point the finger? Or was there also a hope that the suspects themselves would see that they were identified and then they would start what they ended up doing, which is take it on the lam?
Well, my take would be this was directed to friends, family, and associates, because everyone in the world looked at those photos, and if you knew either of these two individuals, you knew those were the subjects. And the expectation is that you need to report that. We've always said, you know, for the past how many years, even when I was at the Washington field office, homegrown lone wolf was our biggest threat, because we had no threat stream. There was no chatter. There was no intelligence of an individual such as the Holocaust shooter or other individuals.
Or Ted Kaczynski, yeah.
Or Ted. And as you talk about Ted Kaczynski, so how long did we labor about printing the manifesto?
Right.
Yeah.
And there were so many discussions about if you print it, you validate it. And, you know, those are decisions that you make. And I think that's also the American public need to understand. Law enforcement is not a finite science.
Yeah, but clearly the FBI understood that when those pictures were released, that things were going to get intense very quickly.
Well, I think, you know, number one, they needed that identification. You couldn't move forward without it. If they went underground, like Ted Kaczynski, and say they detonated those devices and now they went underground and we didn't hear from them for years, it could be a challenging event. So, law enforcement, it's like playing poker. You're dealt a set of cards, and you can't pick those cards. You have to play with those cards. and I think they made the right decision. And now we have a very volatile situation, and my heart and soul goes out to them. This is extremely volatile.
Joe Persichini, it is, and we're going to continue covering it. And you were great. Please stay by your phone as the morning develops. We may come back to you. He is the executive director of the D.C. Police Foundation and former assistant director in charge of the Washington Field Office for the FBI. He's Joe Persichini. Stay with us.